We arrive at a moment of exceptional honor, one that transcends nations, titles, and accolades. A moment to listen to a global icon of science, sustainability, and human progress.
Our next guest of honor is a name etched in the annals of global thought leadership. A man whose intellect has guided governments, inspired generations, and helped shape the world's sustainable development agenda.
He is a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, recognized for his critical contributions to the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change and one of Sri Lanka's most celebrated sons of the world stage.
That's right. He's also a former vice chair of the IPCC and an esteemed scholar in energy, environment, and economics. He has stood at the crossroads of policy and planetary survival for decades.
Please give a massive round of applause and rise in admiration and join us in welcoming on stage Professor Mohan Munashinghe, Nobel laureate and Global Championship of Sustainability.
Aibuan, Namaste, Vanakkam, greetings. Thank you for inviting me, especially Dr. Singh and WPDO. We are all connected on one planet. We must unite to save the earth and ourselves. Let us act now together. So I will talk to you about sustainability and peace in a multipolar world and the key leadership role for business. Just a quick thought on sustainability. Humanity has a very large ecological footprint, which is the sum total of resources we need to sustain 8 billion people on this planet. In 2012, we needed 1.5 planets, already exceeding by 50%. By 2030, we will need 2 planets worth, and we don't have that. So we are exceeding the sustainability limits. Now let's ask who is consuming these resources. 85% of resources are consumed by the richest 20% of the Earth's population. They're consuming 60 or 70 times more per capita than the poorest. So huge inequalities. 1% of the richest own more wealth than the remaining 99%. 3,000 billionaires are getting even richer while almost 1 billion people are hungry. Global military spending is over $2 trillion. Less than 1/10 of that is spent on helping the poor. So if you put those two panels together on the top, you see that the rich are already consuming more than 1 planet worth, which is why we have so many unmet goals and promises for 75 years. And I say this to world leaders at big conferences, and they are not very happy with me, but it is the truth. In 1947, you had something called the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In 2015, we have the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which were shown on this screen at the beginning. Every one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals were in that old document of 1947. So in 75 years, we haven't advanced very far, have we? In 1992, more than 30 years ago at the Rio Earth Summit, I presented a framework called Sustainomics. And the whole idea was to bring the earth back to sustainability. It is also a framework for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and many other things. The first concept is very simple. It's a triangle. We need economic prosperity to raise the poor out of poverty. We need to protect the environment in the process, not to destroy it. And we need social progress. We need to share the benefits through inclusion and empowerment. Right? If you unpack this triangle, you have the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I won't go through them. All of you know them very well. But it is universal. It is probably the last chance we have as humanity to go forward to sustainability. I believe that the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and the global majority will lead the way to this world vision of peace and prosperity. The second core concept is equally important for all of us here. I believe that sustainable development, even climate change, is like a mountain. The peak is covered with clouds. We don't know where it is, but we keep walking uphill. Eventually we get there. That is what Dr. Singh and many others in this room are trying to do. Doing something for sustainability is not very difficult. When we leave this room, we switch off the light. We can turn off a tap. We can plant a tree. We can do it within our companies, within our cities, within our countries, build up. But the power of the individual is very important. And certainly, I won't go through this. As business leaders, you know, there are many things we can do. Corporate social responsibility, ESG, triple bottom line, sustainability account, so many things that can be done, right? The third core concept, also very important, is within our own minds. We have to have innovation and fresh ideas. But the most important thing is values. Unfortunately, we have many unethical, unsustainable values driving us. And that is, for example, like violence, greed, and so on. We need to get rid of this starting from the lowest level. Education is so important, starting from the kindergarten. We have to have generations of young people who learn to do the sustainable things. We need to work with many disciplines to think in global scales and centuries. But most importantly, we need to work across stakeholders. Because here, business is extremely important. Because governments increasingly are less and less capable of solving the complex problems of sustainability and poverty and so on. So, business and civil society must work together with governments, not against. You know, it's easy to criticize governments and say they're all rogues, we don't want it. But we must push them to work in the right direction. And through those, we can improve local, national, and global governance. I have worked with some of the top business leaders, multinationals. You name it, I mean, BASF, top in chemicals, supermarkets, retail, energy, plantations, biotech, all of these. There are three things that I've talked to the boards and leaders of these companies. One is sustainability and triple bottom line, very important. But resource use efficiency, win-win options are extremely important. You can save the environment by using less energy, less water, less land, and so on. That way, you not only save the environment, but you actually increase your profits. That is a very positive contribution that business can start with. And of course, ethical values, which I mentioned before. That is the long-term way to go. Let me finish by talking a few words about climate change. It is very real, despite what the naysayers, there are many people who are doubting climate change. But global warming is proven. In the future, continuing climate change will harm especially the poor. This is totally unfair because they had the least to do with creating the problem. So, we need sustainable development because through sustainable development, we can address not only the problem of climate change, but all the other problems poverty, hunger, ill health, and all of those things. So we have to march on a unified front. That is what SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals, are all about. And I must also talk to you a little bit about climate justice. This is very passionate because we have to fairly allocate the burden of climate change. In 1992, the Framework Convention had a very important wording: common but differentiated responsibility. What does this mean? Common responsibility means 8 billion people on the planet must work together to solve the problem of climate change. Differentiated means different folks, different strokes. For the richer countries with high emissions, they have to focus more on mitigation instead of trying to pass the burden on to the poor. For the poor, adaptation is important because when you have climate change, you have droughts, floods, many other things, and we have to protect the poor. That is our first responsibility. In the last 3 Conference of Parties, which are gatherings of governments to solve climate change, we have moved closer to something called a loss and damage fund. This is built on something called the polluter pays principle. It's very well known locally that if somebody pollutes, they can be sued, they have to pay. The loss and damage fund is a voluntary contribution so far by the rich countries, where poor countries can approach the fund and say, look, we have suffered because of this climate change so far, give us some money. But we had to fight tooth and nail just to get that small element of global justice, the loss and damage fund, which was approved in Baku last year. Let me just very briefly mention a second aspect of climate justice. Suppose that every human being on the planet has an equal right to emit carbon dioxide. I mean, when you breathe and exhale your breath, carbon dioxide is coming out. Everybody has an equal right. But since 1850, if you look at per capita emissions, the Western countries have emitted much more than the global average. The poorer countries, much less. So there is a climate debt. If you calculate that, and I've done it, it's around 40 to 45 trillion dollars over 200 years, right? If you look at the financial debt, I mean, Sri Lanka went through a very bad time a few years ago because we were supposed to be in debt, a bankrupt country. The total financial debt of the poor countries is only 10 trillion. It's 1/4 the climate debt. So we can easily say, you pay us our climate debt and we can pay you back easily the financial debt. That is an element of climate justice which nobody has thought about. Think about it. Last point. I think Asia and BRICS will lead the way to sustainability. And you may not be able to see this diagram, but there is something called the global economic center of gravity of the planet, which is where, if you look at the center of gravity concept, in 0 AD, this global economic center of gravity was in Asia because China, India, and other countries were the most wealthy. By 1950, that center of gravity moved to the middle of the Atlantic. Why? Because the Western countries had become rich, partly due to plundering and colonialism, but they were rich. But look, by 2025, the center of gravity has moved right back into Asia because it is Asia that is resurgent. And if you look now at the past century, you had a very unipolar world with the US and Europe at the top and the global majority, 85% of the people in the BRICS and the global south, very much subordinate, right? This was a unipolar world. But if you look in 2023, the transition has already happened. The BRIC share of global GDP in purchasing power parity terms, a particular measurement, is 36%. It is greater than the G7, which is only 28%. And the BRICS majority is growing. More countries are joining. So what we have now is this multipolar world. And I'm mentioning this because business has to survive and to prosper in this framework. BRICS and the Global South are more interested in sustainable development, in mutual trade and prosperity and other things. They are not interested in wars. I'm a lifelong campaigner for peace, so I feel very strongly about that. There will be other blocs, the USA, Europe, and others. They are bound a little more by military alliances like NATO and driven by a part of business which I do not like, and that is the armaments industry. But I think we have to focus on trade, on harmonious interactions, on cultural exchanges. We have to avoid war at any cost. And we have to work on that. And the business community has a very, very important role to play. So, watch out for potential surprises. Okay, all my theorizing may fail. We have climate change, of course, which is coming. It's a risk multiplier because it makes all the other problems worse. But you can environmental problems, social unrest, terrorism, economic crises, and uncertainty. This is very important now with all these tariff wars that are going on, unleashed by one country, but affecting everybody else. It is destroying supply chains because of the uncertainty and the volatility. It is destroying demand because how can people buy if their duties are increased? So you have to survive and work in that framework. And the way to sustainability is to influence your leaders to go back to a more sane and normal world, okay? And I would say, as a campaigner for peace and nuclear disarmament, more than ever before, we must avoid war, and especially nuclear World War III. That is an extinction event. Nobody will survive that. So business can lead the way to sustainability and peace. We can strengthen innovation and resilience. I end with a blessing from the preamble to our Constitution, which says, may the rains come in time, this is the environment. May the harvest be bountiful, which is the economy. May the people be happy and contented. May the king be righteous. That is the social side. So my ancestors knew about this triangle. We are just trying to rediscover it now. I belong to something called the Munashinghe Institute for Development. If you want to know more about these things, please contact me. Stuti, Nandri, thank you very much.